Welcome to the world famous Bitcoin Original Gangster, the show that takes no shit when it comes to SegWit. On this show, we'll be defending Bitcoin gangster style and exposing the shit in shitcoins. The idea of this show is that you ask us your questions on crypto and we'll tell you all that we know. Let's get the disclaimers out of the way. All the opinions that you hear on this show are opinion and must only ever be taken as opinion. They are never to be taken as any form of advice, family, financial, sexual or otherwise. And on that note, let's rock and roll. Nicely to other people in the crypto space. And I was just like, mate, that guy's a fucking scammer. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's just like, I think it's about time we called a few people on it, if you ask me.
Hey man, it's your channel, you can do whatever you want. I think that's what's important as well. People have to also realize that, if you create a channel, I mean, it's important to get community user feedback, but at the same time, it's still your channel. You know what I mean? And if people like you, they'll follow, and if they don't, then that's on them.
That's true. Things are, I guess, with my channel, I don't have any intention of being kind of like a celebrity or a superstar or anything like that. My main concern is to stop people from losing money, because it hurts. It hurts badly,
For sure. And that's the trouble, right? I mean, it's hard because you have to be able to inform people as best as possible, but you also cannot control people being stupid with their money either.
You can't control people being stupid in general.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, really, if we're honest, right? And maybe this is just a result of us seeing enough of this stuff happen. And despite getting the information and information being freely available, people will gravitate to personalities still, even though we talk about this all the time.
Yeah. It's, I did a show with Kurt Watter the other day, and the topic of discussion was what is it that went wrong during these debates, for example, that he had with Hotep? Because I I wanted in on that debate. And so I was kind of like watching it half-hearted, thinking, I could do better than these boys, blah blah blah. But then watching them, honestly, I was so proud of the job that they did. Literally, they blew me away with the information. But and I was watching them thinking, wow, these boys are absolutely fantastic. But I could tell it was just going straight over the head of Hotep, and they were just basically being beaten down with just social politics and bullshit, because they made so many points. They literally rebutted every single point that these BTC has put over, and yet they couldn't make that guy understand what it was they were saying, because it was just beyond his intellectual capabilities.
The other thing too, my opinion on this is more when it comes to communicating, right? A lot of people fail to also establish at the very beginning what their underlying belief system is. Because if you haven't noticed already, right? When people debate or argue, they're already coming with their own bias. They're already coming with their own set views, right? Very few go into a debate to have their mind changed, even if they say so. There are very few who are actually, I won't say intellectually capable, but open-minded enough to be able to shift their views on the fly, right? Because those who are being called out usually already are being called out for having a strong opinion. And so every time I see a debate, that's why I see it can be quite useless sometimes, is because people are looking to change the minds of the other person, and they're not in the frame or mindset of actually, let me be open to see where this person is coming from. It's always about I need to tell you why you're wrong.
Yeah, well, I think it's a really good point that you make there. But the thing is, though, there has to be. I think what it is people are digging and searching for is that one point where the story gets confused, or there's political spin, or someone has got it wrong. If somebody is lying to you, if you ask them enough questions, eventually they will change their story, because their story won't make sense because it is a lie. And so this is the thing. This is the thing with BTC. At some point, they are going to say something that they will trip up over themselves. And it's that point that people are trying to, people in BSV are basically sort of like trying to make them get to themselves. Because nobody quite knows where it is. Is it this? Is it the narratives they've been spun, like this store of value, BS? I mean, it's just like they've been told that gold bullion is a store of value. It's just like, well, no, gold bullion is a medium of exchange. That's why it's been turned into bullion, so they can exchange it. It's gold stuck in a rock 200 meters underground. Is of no value or use to anybody. So that's why they actually bother going down, extracting it, mining it, refining it, molding it, to turn it into a medium of exchange. So, it cannot have any value unless it is a medium of exchange. And then it can be exchanged for something of its equivalent value.
Yeah, fair. I mean, the other thing in terms of store of value, right? If you look at the properties, I mean, I kind of take Mike Maloney's definitions of are you familiar with Mike Maloney?
Yeah, I know him. Yeah.
Right. So he does consider gold to be really the only true money, and he does consider it to be a store of value, right? And the reason why he considers it to be a store of value is because it has held value in general across time, longer than any other sort of medium. And because of that, even though we might not use gold now day to day, right? In times like this, people do still kind of go back to this metal, right? Because every time a civilization has collapsed, gold has been that thing that people kind of rush to, because it is something from nature. It's still physical. And anytime that we go into peace times, I'll call it, is when we find other sort of mediums of exchange or something else to store value. Because really, like, the store of value is coming from us still. Like, we are giving it, right, meaning by saying, like, right now people might not consider gold to be a store of value, but when shit hits the fan, and you're looking at empirical evidence, as Roger Ver would always say, right? Gold has historically always been a good store of value compared to any other forms of currency. And so I found that interesting because I never looked at it that way either. And I forgot to ask. So with this channel, is this what you're gonna be using now for live streaming or recording? Like, what's the plan?
This is just simply recording, because I didn't.
Okay, cool.
Yeah, I didn't want to. I didn't. I mean, because I'm all for courage. I'm all for encouraging everybody in BSV, and sort of Captain Bitcoin is really good at doing his live streams. So I want to sort of encourage him to do, because I mean he's adding value to BSV. I mean, he puts a lot of effort into that channel, like some serious effort. Do you know what I mean? It's like literally almost every day, like he is there bang on, like 6-7 o'clock, getting people on the show, and he's quite positive, and he puts in a lot of effort. So it's kind of like, anybody who's going to put in proof of work to add value to BSV, I'm going to encourage. So it's kind of like he's good at doing his live shows, but me personally, I like getting into the sort of the nitty gritty, and I prefer like a one-on-one where I'm not having to deal with sort of like people earwigging as it were and typing in the chat box and whatnot. But he's all about bringing the community, which is his bag. But I'm more about sort of like I want to get to know individuals and then hear what that individual has got to offer in terms of, is this something that other people can learn from this? Is there something like another point of view they can take that can help them understand it? All this kind of thing. So it's really interesting coming at it from different perspectives. So I can talk to techies, I can talk to social media people. You can talk to cryptographic people. You can talk to business people. You can talk to fund managers. And they all have a different perspective on how they see it. So then when you gather all those perspectives together, the idea is that you can sort of squish them together and say, like, there we go. That's kind of like the disconnect that sort of everybody's missing, that kind of the holy grail that everybody needs to get to. Sort of,
I hear you.
As it were.
Yep. Different styles. And it's good that you've, I guess, identified that as well. And it's one of the reasons why we also launched our weekly podcast, Fireside, this morning. So Adam Bokit.
Excellent.
Yeah. So Adam Bokit, so we're kind of going, I'm going to be talking about this today on the BSV channel too, about just sort of like how we've pivoted with Fire. and why, and I mean what the plan was all along. So the podcast, we are gonna focus more on just like bridging gaps between people and technology in general. But of course, we always slide Bitcoin SV into it. But the reason for that is because taking the approach that even Craig has, where Bitcoin was always meant to be a plumbing system, right? We want to start shifting the conversation away from Bitcoin, and looking at the actual use cases and solutions, and having Bitcoin literally fade into the background. So instead of us, talking about it's still important from a marketing standpoint and perception, I get that. But I think what Craig has sort of betted on is by, going to scale with applications and products on top of Bitcoin, and having that encourage utility. It just does what it was always meant to, which is just work. And so then people will ideally stop focusing so much on just the politics, because the protocol is set in stone. I think we got one more step left in the Genesis upgrade, and then after that, there's no need to argue about this stuff. We just will build stuff, and that is definitely a different approach compared to others. I think what annoys people right now is, of course, still the perception of Bitcoin SV is negative, because of Craig Wright, but it is what it is. And so I think it's even more important that we do encourage more building on top, because then you can have the focus on these new products that actually do something for people and are actually significantly better than stuff before. And it just helps, with the transactions on chain. And so, yeah, for us on the podcast side, what we want to do is we just want to bring in people who are, bringing together the people in tech, right? Like finding ways to bridge gaps between that. And essentially any person building on Bitcoin is doing that, because they're bridging gaps between users and use cases with the tech, which is Bitcoin SV, and the blockchain side of things. So, we want to just start shifting more into that conversation, and then indirectly bring in, Bitcoin SV stuff. Like Calvin Ayre was on for today's episode. Adam
was it great
Bokit,
stuff?
Yep, Adam Bokit was the one. He's going to be leading that podcast, which is great. And we just asked some very simple questions about his views on BSV. What's happening right now with the world in terms of COVID-19, et cetera. And, we're going to just keep monitoring ourselves with each episode to see what works, what doesn't, and just try to get, wisdom out of a lot of these influencers, leaders, and people who are at the forefront. And again, this ties into sort of our renewed sense of purpose. During this time, I attended this webinar by a guy named Daniel Priestley, who I know from a company called Dent. They have this program called Key Person of Influence. Actually, I highly recommend, if you haven't heard of the book Key Person of Influence, for anybody who's sort of like yourself, has got a channel or looking to build out a personal brand. The book Key Person of Influence actually taught me quite a lot. But anyways, Daniel Priestley had this webinar, and he was talking about why it's so important to reset things right now, and to also look at how what you're doing is tied to the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals, right? I don't know if you've heard of SDPs.
No. What are they?
SDPs was a set of goals. I think there's 16, 20. But there are these global goals that the United Nations set based on all of their time working with big global problems, and they essentially put these targets for 2030. And the idea behind it was that to help align people who are working locally or on the ground, instead of trying to think about the world's big complex problems, right? Well, why don't we just put our efforts towards goals that are already set by the United Nations, and have whatever it is you're doing contribute towards that. So it's really good for aligning efforts in general. And as I was going through, Daniel Priestley had asked us to just take a look at the goals, right? And say, okay, looking at all these goals, which ones do you resonate with the most? And interestingly, and I'm just going to bring up Sustainable Development Goals. So interestingly, the one that stood out for me was number 10, which is reduced inequalities. All right, and the reason for that is I've always been sort of a fan of the underdog, right? I've always been a fan of sort of, if there are people who are displaced, who are at a disadvantage, first of all, why are they in that position? How can you help them, whether it's through education or through helping them integrate technologies and getting a leg up or something of the sort? That's kind of always been a theme throughout my career. And so I was like, you know what? That one probably looks like the most, it resonates the most with me. So I'm just clicking in now. If you click into that.
Do you want a screen share?
Oh, yeah. That's probably a good idea. Give me one sec. Bring it up. Forgot that I could do that. All right. And I think this is like, if you remember, right, CoinGeek London, when Craig and them started talking about how, they've got like a mission around like helping to reduce or helping to address the opioid crisis, in the world. You get a greater sense of purpose and mission, right? Because now it isn't just about technology and cool new stuff. You're like, this is an actual problem in our world right now. And, if you can make that connection between the tech and these issues that are, hurting people, then why not? Okay, I'm just looking for the screen share.
Top right of your screen, if you move your mouse, like 3 buttons or 3 dots will come up. There we go.
Got it. So used to, okay, wait. Reduce inequality. Cool. All right, do you see my screen?
I do. Looks good.
All right, so you see the reduced inequalities?
Yes.
All right, cool. So on this one, I mean, there's a lot of different types of inequalities in the world, right? And I'm more of an equity, how to make the world more equitable, but this is the closest, So if you look at goal 10 targets, it talks a lot about socioeconomic issues, right? Because we're about bridging gaps between people and technology for FIRE in general. We often talk about communities and then blockchain as the tech side, right? But socioeconomic issues fascinate me to no end. And here we have empower and promote the social, economic, and political inclusion of all, irrespective, blah, blah, blah. Equal opportunity, reducing inequalities of outcome, right? This is, looking at how we can actually create new ways for people to get paid. So I would say Twitch actually does help contribute to this, right? For people to be able to earn something simply by creating useful content. Social protection policies, improve the regulation and monitoring of global financial markets, right? That's very much related to law in the blockchain space. Enhance representation and voice for developing countries in decision-making, global, international, economic, blah, blah, blah. I mean, all of these things here are things that, like, I guess we resonate with. Financial flows, foreign direct investment, reduce to less than 3% the transaction costs of migrant remittances. Does that sound something similar to what Bitcoin can help with?
Yeah.
Right?
Brilliant.
So, right, you look at this, and if your application or solution and built products can assist with that, like, you're already contributing to these targets that are actually set by the United Nations at a global level, And so this is what, after looking at this, I'm like, man, I didn't realize that this, was here. I've heard people talk about SDGs, and I think it just kind of gives more power to whatever it is you're looking to achieve, right? To connect it with something that is higher. And at the end of the day, I think a lot of people seek that purpose, right? If they're struggling to come up with that on their own, this allows to give you some direction.
Yeah, so, that's really good. Really good.
Yeah. So that's just sort of, I guess, where we're at right now. We realize, especially at this point in time, we've obviously been looking to assist people with the BSV integration side, but because of what's happening in the world right now, the conversations, all people we were talking about, they've stopped even talking about Bitcoin or blockchain or crypto that much because they are simply more worried about survival. They're worried about, okay, hey, everybody needs to work from home. How do we get our workers to work from home properly? How do we get them set up on Slack? These are very practical things. And surprisingly or unsurprisingly, because we had the community component, people reached out to us around, hey, I heard you do like online community stuff, and do you think you could help us build like an employee community online or help guide us in the right direction, get us set up on Slack? Or like, sure, put together a package and away you go. People will obviously pay for stuff right now that is of immediate value, that's of importance. And so we had to shift a little bit towards that because we were looking at, okay, what do people need right now? and we do that while still remembering what our future goals were. So that's sort of what has happened at this point in time. As a result of that work, we still let them know that, hey, we've got this thing called BSV in the blockchain space. You might be interested because there are people who may be looking to find ways to earn some money right now. There might be an opportunity to build if you've lost your business. Check it out. There could be some opportunities here for you to build like the next big unicorn if you want, off of a very solid, stable blockchain. So that's how we're treating it.
Yeah, the market that we're in is really quite strange because even the gold price has taken a hit, and that's because people realise that at the end of the day, cash is king. You can't go down your local supermarket and give them a bar of gold. And when you haven't got any money coming in, you need a medium of exchange where you can exchange for resources and food. Gold doesn't do that. So that's why even gold has taken a hit, because suddenly people are just like, well, actually, gold is no use for me right now. I need to get my shopping from Tesco's. I need to buy a bog roll.
Yes, but that might change. My man, because we haven't really hit the bottom yet. We are only it's only been 1 to 2 months that the rest of the world has really hit. This, like, the way I see it, right? It's like you've got recession, right? You've got the pandemic. So it's like you've got the pandemic, followed by recession, and then the massive wave is going to be depression. That's my opinion. If we don't get the depression side, in a weird way, I worry, because it's like we're kind of due for this, for the depression side. And if that takes place, it might be like the economic fallout or the effects of that might be 7 to 25 years, based on like stuff that I've been absorbing from a lot of different people. I think at minimum, you're looking at 18 to 24 months where the economic fallout will be like really be felt by everybody. A lot of people are thinking they're going to be able to go back to work in 2 weeks. The world is not going to be the same, right? The economic knock-on effects of what has happened is huge. I don't even think we'll really start to feel the depths of what just 1 month, right, of travel bans and people staying at home is going to have economically until about October. This is absorbing in just like a lot of different data points at this point in time. And again, like, personally, I was prepared for this. I knew this was coming. I think a lot of other people in our space probably were. But it still doesn't take away the pain.
What have you done to prepare for it?
In terms of preparation, one, I left Australia because I knew that things were going to get get bad. That's why I moved to Singapore. And guess what? Singapore is one of like the best places to be right now during this pandemic, because it's smaller, it's easier to manage, right? So in times like this, they don't have massive, like the United States, right? They don't have a massive continent, to have to try and manage during this crisis. So here in Singapore, they've got the benefit of also very solid foundations. Before I came, I remember reading up on Lee Kuan Yew, who was the guy responsible for turning Singapore over 50 years from a third world country to a first world country.
Wow.
Right? That is like unprecedented. And, if you look throughout history as well, like the UK, England, right? Small island nation that did a lot of, it had a lot of power, right? At one point in time. Right. And so there's something that I really like about these stories of these like small island nations who were able to punch way above their weight. And so that's why I came to Singapore, because I also felt like a lot of the economic flow was going to shift to the east, right? So it's been in the west, but it's just like a constant, pendulum swinging back and forth. If you accept sort of like that, everything goes in cycles. Yeah.
So can I get your opinion on what might happen at this block reward halving, as you're quite good at having foresight?
I mean, look, none of us are fortune tellers. Okay, maybe there are some fortune tellers in the world. But like for me, just going off of what I've seen with the halving, I think what's going to happen, I don't know about the price, if it'll be affected that much, but I think we're going to see the effects on the miners mostly, and their ability to keep up, right? So because I'm sort of banking on the fact that because there's not as much like utility right, happening on chain for the miners on the BTC side. And also, I mean, on the BCH side, they've still been focusing on the cash, which is not a bad thing, right? Like, but we know that a lot of the changes that they made on the protocol level, like it'll have more longer term consequences. So that might not be seen as wildly during this period. For BSV, I think it's just in a lot stronger position. This is why I look at a couple of decades. I look at how Singapore took them about 50 years, right, to get to that, to the point that they are now. So a couple generations. So that's why I also kind of look at between 20 to 50 years to see the true results, right, of everything we're doing right now. A lot of people don't think that long ahead, and that's why I always respected Craig, because he does think that long ahead.
Yeah, he does. Yeah, he does.
Very few people do these days because our incentives also are misaligned, right? You even look at democracy. In a democracy, presidents they're only incentivized to really give a shit about the years that they are in office, which is 4 years, maximum 8. Yep. So you never have true longevity, of change. So, yeah, I think with the halving reward, my opinion is going to be that there might not be as wild of a swing that some people are expecting in price and stuff, but I think you will start to see the rate at which miners just give up, right? Increase very rapidly, and then I think there'll be another knock-on effect elsewhere after that, because I'm already seeing some miners. There was news today that I saw, like a Venezuelan miner, or maybe Brazilian miner, just called quits, couldn't keep up, it just wasn't profitable. Unlike Calvin and co, who have the money to be able to keep spending. And you look at the history of Calvin's decisions too, they just got foresight. That's why they don't see it as losing money. Of course they will lose money short term, but it's they're still invested. They still see what will happen in longer term, right? Calvin isn't stupid. He would have looked at, the numbers and seen okay, in each of these scenarios, are we still going to be good? He might need to adjust some things here and there, which I think a lot of people have seen already. But the play is much more longer term. And that's why I got mad respect for both Calvin and Craig, because I don't think everybody sees what they see. And
clearly not.
Yeah, it's vision, vision backed up by very pragmatic effort, towards it, and balls, really. Towards things like that, because people are just why the hell are you investing in this shitty chain? It's just it's not the real Bitcoin, blah blah. Why would you keep investing in it? And it's let's talk, right? 20 to 50 years.
Man, I would say let's talk in 6 months, maybe less.
Yeah, well, right. Well, I mean, Craig talked about how this whole recession, everything that's happening right now will affect BSV as well, right? So do not rely on the price of BSV to just completely shatter everybody else immediately. I'm not expecting it to, but again, I'm looking at the foundations and fundamentals. They are there, and if you can see that, and you can have patience.
How come you're not expecting it to, as you just said?
Because one, also Craig is not good at predicting price historically. You know what I mean? And two,
yeah, but let's get your opinion on that. Do you think that was a troll? I personally think it was. I think it was hilarious, and he got me. I could have done without it, but I mean, I laugh at myself looking back. It was so ridiculous.
Yeah, I mean, look, I never looked to Craig as a Warren Buffett or any of those sort of things, right? He's not a trader. Do you not think
he did it to teach people a lesson, though?
I mean, could be, but I mean, at the same time, if he's wrong, he could always say that, I was just joking. So you know what I mean, right? It's I was joking. I mean, I've seen that behavior as well.
I think it was a lesson. It had to be a lesson because it was so stupid. It was just, It was a lesson for everybody. It was just look, don't ask anybody about price. Because price is purely set by a supply and demand, which are social factors at a specific moment in time. And when you ask somebody what the price is going to be at a specific time, you're effectively asking them to compromise their integrity. There's nobody can predict the price, because if they could, the market would be completely manipulated and therefore actually have no fundamental value at all. It would be a complete joke.
Yeah, I mean, but it still happens, right? Like insider trading, all that sort of stuff. You know, I put an episode out, so like I rebooted something called the It Will Come Show, which I started like whoa, I think it was 5 years ago, and it was this daily show that I was doing just to kind of map my journey while I was on the hunt for a job, actually. So I used the show as a marketing ploy,
Oh yeah.
to be honest. And then it was actually doing quite well. And then, you know, I found my job, and then it was a bit harder to commit to the show every day. But I rebooted it at this time because I think people were kind of craving the type of content that I was producing back then and had been asked. So I said, you know what? This isn't a bad time to sort of also have like a daily routine, right? That's inspiring for me, and seems to be inspiring for others. So I rebooted it, and well, I've mentioned and I've talked about, you know, these things around price, digital cash, etc. You know, I interviewed Craig for something called the Breakthrough Conference,
Yeah, yeah,
and
saw that. Very good.
yeah, so that was fun. You know, always fun interviewing him. And when we were talking, he was talking about the differences between like digital cash, you know, digital currency versus cryptocurrencies. And it was interesting because somebody messaged me after about, you know, what is the difference between digital currency and cryptocurrency, right? And I mean, at a very fundamental level, the difference obviously is just the cryptographic element. You could have digital virtual currencies in games, right? And it has value within a game environment. But you know, the cryptocurrency came from the cryptographic side, and that is, you know, I guess has brought a little bit more legitimacy to to that currency, to these currencies. But you know, Craig was saying that like the narrative needs to shift away from cryptocurrency. That Bitcoin itself is not a cryptocurrency, which I found interesting because Calvin also echoed this too in the episode today. And you know, what does that mean? What does that mean moving forward, right? Like, if we're not considering ourselves a cryptocurrency, do we just get out of that entire market, you know, ecosystem? Because Binance just bought out Coin Market Cap. I don't know if you saw that news.
I did see that. Yeah, for 400 million. That's
Yeah.
That's more than Mike Ashley wants for Newcastle United.
Yep. You know, and what's amazing is that, like, yeah, you know, despite what Craig says, there are businesses, of course, that are still just gonna keep on keeping on, right? People have their friends, people have their networks, their cabals, whatever you want to call them. And you know, I think one of the things that maybe is lacking in our BSV space, and maybe even the BCH, right, is sometimes we can be so niche and so focused, like we don't see the forest from the trees when it comes to attention and marketing, because you can see with people like Binance, right, they appeal to the what's the word, the idealistic side, right? It's like, oh, we're listening to our community, we're helping others by giving donations and that sort of stuff.
Yeah, trying to cover up their criminality. It's outrageous. Donating to the church to rebuild Notre Dame and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, I mean, maybe, but the thing is, right, like, folks in the Binance world, like, I think because they're showing an effort to be more legitimate, they might be able to. However, because, you know, blockchains don't forget, a lot of stuff from the past might come back to haunt them. I think that's what's going to be the issue for them. I think they might have, I don't think they're intentionally, I hope they're not intentionally trying to be, you know, criminals through all this. I just kind of look at it as maybe like naivety, of, you know, of the younger generation going out and saying, like, you know, hey, it's a new world, fuck the rules, don't need to worry about that, and we'll just do what we want. But yeah, the past, I think, in the blockchain crypto world will come back to haunt some.
Yeah, most definitely, I'd agree with that. Absolutely.
Yeah.
I think if I would not want to be in CZ's shoes right now. But you know, I mean, are they gonna confiscate his assets off him? Because you know, it would be worth doing jail time for however many billion you've made. I mean, it's like, oh yeah, you got to spend like, I mean, I can't imagine they'll be that harsh on him. What, probably 2 years? Yeah, 2 years in jail, and you still walk away with $1 billion. Do you know what I mean? It's like being in jail, being paid $500 million for your time per year. You know, I would say that's probably worth it. You know, but if they actually confiscate his assets off him and then bang him in jail, then yeah, I could. I think it would probably start crying at that. Over here in the UK, we have what they call the Proceeds of Crime Act, where the law can actually go in and confiscate assets of people. But this is where criminals use loopholes in the law. They'll rent properties, they'll lease cars, they'll transfer ownership of their assets into family members' names and all this kind of stuff, so they or put them in a trust, so that the law just simply can't confiscate them.
Yep.
So
exactly.
I guess that's what he's going to do, really. But yeah, I mean, apart from naming and shaming and maybe spending a little bit of jail time. Yeah, he's made his money. He's going to be set, but yeah, he still needs to be stopped because what he's doing is effectively laundering money for people through his exchange.
Yeah. I mean, I know how Craig feels about this, but if the world's justice, right? Well, a lot of people who are guilty of things or who do bad things who get away with it, sadly. But I guess it's all about reducing, and this is why, like when I was talking about this. The Sustainable Development Goals, right? Reducing inequalities and sort of helping with injustices. I think that's something that appeals.
Well, this is actually where I think the single ledger comes in. I don't suppose have you seen any of my articles that I've written recently on Medium? I sent.
No, I haven't.
Oh, I've been on 5 recently. Yeah, mate. I'll send them all to you after this show, but. One of them was, I wrote one called Bitcoin, the power of its decentralized distributed single ledger. And this is probably the most valuable proposition that I think everybody in Bitcoin, other than Craig, has probably missed. And that is that Bitcoin is what funds this distributed single ledger. So it's the ledger that is distributed and decentralized itself, and it's Bitcoin that enables that, because if the ledger was funded by an external source, you could just simply cut the funding and the ledger would disappear. Whereas the ledger is self-sustaining via because of microtransactions. So microtransactions is the smallest operation that a miner is willing to do that's still economically viable for him to perform. The smallest amount of data on the ledger. So now that the ledger itself is decentralized, you can have all of these different records on it. So the example I gave in the article was flight MH370, Malaysian Airlines, that went missing. The reason it went missing is because it flew in and out of Thai and Malaysian airspace multiple times. And because you cannot have all of air traffic control records on one single ledger, because somebody could just simply attack it and take it down and therefore bring down the entire airline industry. Each air traffic control, is responsible for their own airspace. So if their airspace goes down, it just means that nobody else does. But when you've got a plane flying in between the two, and the moment it leaves the airspace, they're no longer responsible for it. They just sort of wash their hands of it. They're like, oh, we're not our problems anymore. Someone else is. And then that other person is going, oh, it's not our problem either. And then it flies out towards the Indian Ocean and eventually vanishes off the radar with nobody tracking it or keeping tabs on it, apart from the military, obviously. Whereas now with Bitcoin creating a single ledger, you can now have all of the data from each of the air traffic controllers on this single ledger, because it's the single ledger that doesn't have that central point of authority that would enable it to be taken down. And this is massive. This is not just airplanes. This is driverless cars. It would be absolutely reckless and irresponsible to have driverless cars all run on one single, a server or corporate database. Because you could just take it down. Millions of people would lose their lives with car crashes and stuff like that. And then you've got car registrations in America. You've got one database for all the car registrations, but when it comes to criminals, each state has got its own law department, and they don't share records with each other. So if you're a murderer, you can just simply go from state to state, committing one murder in each, and the police wouldn't have a clue who you are or where you came from or what your next move would be. Whereas now everything can be collated onto this single ledger, and the same goes for sort of stem cell treatment and organ donors, and there's so many things that can go onto this. Because now you can I mean it's basically multiple ledgers that cause corruption and mismanagement, and now you can literally have everything in one, which will increase efficiencies hugely. So like different departments can actually see what each other is doing. There's a clear record that everybody can follow, and this is what I think most people are missing.
Yeah, I mean, well, it depends on who you're talking to, right? Because in the crypto community, I think that's already an established sort of motto, DeFi everything, decentralized finance, decentralize everything. But outside of that, I think maybe people are not seeing that. But it was interesting talking to Craig, right? Just the other day, because when I was asking him, like, so what is sort of like the main thing about Bitcoin? And he actually said it's the micropayments.
Yeah, I remember that. Yeah,
because I know he also, even in the ICU chats, he often talks about, it's like, we need to get away from this, just decentralize everything, because like that's not the prize, or whatever word he used. And I guess I'm starting to understand why he says that, because the decentralization, yes, it has its benefits, right? But if you look at Bitcoin as a system itself, there's multiple things. There's a decentralized, the distributed aspect, the decentralized aspect, the cryptographic aspect. There's a lot of different things that go into Bitcoin, right? And then I think for him, the micropayments, that isn't unique to Bitcoin either, because there are other cryptocurrencies and blockchains that are also offering micropayments. But I think the biggest challenge in order to make all of this work is to get onto one, right? To get onto one blockchain. For any of this sort of stuff to work, people have to agree, right, to utilize and leverage one blockchain. And that's going to be, that's our biggest hurdle, because we can see already people have an aversion to anything centralized, right? And that's the irony. We keep talking about decentralization, yet the way that Bitcoin will work is as one blockchain.
Yeah, but that's because the blockchain is decentralized and distributed.
But people don't even see the paradox in that, right? So whenever they're talking about decentralization, it's like, which aspect are you talking about, right? Are you talking about the distribution or the decentralization of power, right? Are you talking about the distribution or the decentralization of miners, of proof of work, of users? Like, people confuse that all the time. And so, I just, it's funny, like, having listened to Craig for so long, and it's so true that it's like only after years do you finally, like, do things start clicking. And, I remember hearing him from like 2015 when it was talking about, power, right? Like, what this does, what Bitcoin does is really, it's about like decentralizing power. And that, I think, is where the decentralization aspect matters most. From the technical side, we've been focusing so much on trying to decentralize the shit out of, the tech, and we're so worried about it being centralized. And it's like, well, in a crisis situation like what's happening in the world, actually the people who have had centralized governments have actually been able to curb things a lot better than other countries that have been more decentralized, right? And this goes back to yin and yang. Like, there are times where centralization is actually a good thing. Imagine if your car was not centralized, right? Imagine if your wheel could not centralize control of the entire vehicle. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, absolutely.
Body part was moving in its own direction. Like, you could not go anywhere. And so I guess I just a lot of times I have big sighs, when I listen to all the arguments and debates. Hence why I guess now, me and probably others in the BSV camp, it's just like focusing on building, shut out the noise, follow that path, and let the work do its thing. Because there's going to be so much chatter, and yes, it engages people's sort of like drama cells. Because people love entertainment, and it gets so warped into that, and it's a warped reality, right? Yeah, that's my rant.
I think all of this, all of these buzzwords that we're mentioning here, like decentralized and distributed and all this kind of stuff, it all boils down to control. That's the whole point of the whole point of diluting control is to have something that is decentralized, and the way you decentralize it is by distributing it. And all these kind of things. But it's like what people don't get about Blockstream, for example. Blockstream added SegWit to BTC. So in order to add SegWit to BTC and segregate the signatures, so therefore the signatures could no longer validate each other, which means somebody has got complete control of the system because they're no longer accountable to it. They have complete control over it. But then these people are just like, oh, well, it doesn't matter because it's decentralized. Well, I know because it's distributed. And it's just like, no, they have completely hoodwinked you and they have complete control of the system. And the whole point of it being, distributed and supposedly decentralized, having no single source, is that people can't do exactly what they have done.
And how fascinating is it though that they've managed to do it like in a way that I don't even know if like Craig, Satoshi, ever saw happening, right? Like, Craig said he kind of like disappeared for a year or two because he was upset with things like bloody hell, Mount Gox, Silk Road, that sort of stuff happening, right? The very thing that he built Bitcoin to avoid still happened, and so that's why you can never fully predict like the outcomes of creations or inventions. Even what's the saying? The road to hell is often paved with good intentions.
Good,
no
very good.
Yeah, no matter how good your intentions are, there are always unintended consequences. Can start off very noble and then just lead to disaster.
Well, see. Oh, actually, and another thing, talking about leading to disaster and stuff like this. So another point of making something, relinquishing or diluting control is accountability. So, if someone has control of a system, it doesn't matter if they have control of it if they are accountable to people on it, because that means that they can't do whatever they want and get away with it. So this is the whole point. The moment you add anonymity to a system, whoever it was that added that anonymity to the system has complete control of it, and therefore it is utterly centralized. Which completely defeats the object of being libertarian and free, because it's completely the opposite. So all these things, people are getting confused about. They're just like, look, it cannot be anonymous because it means that, the person who created it has control of the system. It has to be, somebody has to be accountable to someone so that no one can get away with doing something that, nobody else would know about. And the way you do that is by, making them accountable to someone. There's all these kind of like really, I mean, it's a bit like what they do when they describe an anonymous systems as privacy coins. It's just a really clever spin to confuse people even further, because the difference between anonymity and privacy, although they might not sound huge, the implications are absolutely massive. Absolutely massive. The moment a system is anonymous, it has a fundamental value of absolutely zero, which is what Roger Ver et al. Do not get, because they're thick as fuck.
I mean, preaching to the choir, brother. It's definitely agree with you on that. And I mean, with Roger, again, I ain't got nothing against Roger because he's always been good to me. But because he's still a smart dude in the sense that like he has been able to, well, one, he owns Bitcoin.com, right? Two,
did you see recently though? Apparently, Bitcoin.com have just had to lay off 50% of their workforce.
Yeah, not surprised. Oof. But I mean, that's a given for everybody, right? Right now, and that's just I
don't know. I don't think Nchain or CoinGeek will be doing that.
No, I think they will be as well.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, we even had to like, even for Faya, unfortunately, like we had to let go of one. We had some shifts happening in our team as well, everywhere. And like, even in my family, there was somebody who lost their job last Friday. Very close. Other people I know in the BSV space, stuff is happening for their teams too. I think it's trying times for everybody. And what you're going to see, right, is that there will be companies and people who are just going to go back to basics and fundamentals. And so I am sticking to any company that has good, solid fundamentals. And, you were talking about accountability. It's interesting you say that, because that's where you might have seen or might not have I often talk about this community we have called the pack. It's a accelerator, but it's all based on accountability through the group, right? Because when it comes to personal productivity, of course, there are some people who are good at keeping themselves disciplined, right? But a large majority like struggle with accountability and productivity for themselves. And so we baked into this group like a rhythm, rituals, like all of that sort of stuff that helps foster, accountability, like just naturally through the social dynamics. And we've got what are they called? We've got a venture. What are people calling it? Phantom venture? No. What do people call like a secret startup? I've seen this used before.
Secret startup.
Yeah, they've got a. I'll come back to you on that later if I can remember. But I'm not saying we have a secret startup, but we actually we're looking to launch something very soon that actually addresses the accountability side that leverages a lot of what we learned in the pack. So it kind of solves a problem that's already there. We actually validated the idea with paying customers in the group without having developed the app, because that's kind of like one of my validators. Like, one, can you sell an idea before building it? Two, can you validate it with paying customers before building it? And then three, if you have that already, if you're able to do that, then go out and build the thing. So we're looking to leverage Bitcoin SV, of course, for the underlying essentially database to make things more efficient. And it actually addresses something that a company in the past attempted to do, but failed because they had to rely on a trusted third party, right, to handle some of the transactions. And so people weren't getting paid out properly. And we're like, looks like that's an opportunity for us. What we're looking to build also helps people make some money for literally holding each other accountable. That's essentially the idea. So, if there's goals that you have, the way that we've got it set up is this sort of like smart. It's relatively simple, the idea, but the way that we're executing it is that people sort of validate what other people accomplish, and through that they then are able to earn money too. And
that's amazing. If you can do something like that, oh my goodness me, that would solve all sorts of problems that corporations have. That would be huge.
Yeah. Well, I mean, this is based off of stuff I have observed, right? So even though I've been involved with like community management stuff, and looking at all these employee communities as well, there's high degrees and high levels of like, poor accountability, productivity in general. And the old way of sort of measuring productivity, right, was based on time input, the number of hours. But then these days, I think if you're moving into a remote environment, you actually have to trust more and look at the results. And so if you can actually have results that are tied to other people in your team that need to validate that, then, well, isn't that interesting, right?
Yeah,
so
really good.
Like you cannot complete a goal until it's validated by the group, but the group gets rewarded. So it's like, if I accomplish it, I get rewarded. And then the team members that have to validate it might add some tips or something. And so you got these really interesting dynamics happening on a micro level that actually incentivize people to create more quality work and prove their work, but it's an experiment. It's going to be an experiment, right? Because it might sound a bit cumbersome too. So the way that we're doing it, focuses on some specific types of goals. But, we want to put it out. We want to get others involved and see where it can go. But it's kind of crunch time now because we weren't really looking to do this until maybe years 3. So maybe about 2 years from now. But because of what's happening in the world, we're like, shit, I know that like even in my family, right, people losing their jobs. And I'm like, well, fuck, people are struggling with productivity in general, right? Being isolated at home. And if they can find a way to actually earn something by holding themselves accountable during these times, like, fuck, why not?
Yeah. Absolutely. Well, have you got Netflix at your place?
Yes, there's NetflixParty.com. I don't know if you've tried that yet.
Oh no, I haven't tried that. But my point was, I've just been. I mean, Netflix is absolutely amazing for some of the programs that they produce, like absolutely sensational. And one of them is just recently called like something like a local drug scandal or something like that. And it was about two drug testing labs in I think Massachusetts whose basically they had two labs within the same state, because the state is kind of like divided into west and east. But they had the drug, the laboratory people who were testing the drugs. They were drug addicts themselves, right? And basically they were responsible for putting over about 30,000 people in jail with drug analyses that were potentially like incorrect. That they had some of them they hadn't even correct. They were just literally signing them off, because they were just like, well, if the person who's being prosecuted knows that the drugs that they were given were not genuine, they would just simply ask for the results to be reanalyzed, because they would know that they weren't genuine. They were like, look, I know that I wasn't dealing cocaine, therefore this test that I've just done is a load of bollocks. I want you to retest it. So they always knew that whenever they didn't come back, that they were just, we can just sign it off anyway. So they weren't actually testing it. And then when it came to their legal rights to have their case overturned, they realised that the evidence hadn't been submitted to the defence lawyers. So they were just like, well, hold on a minute. There is corruption in the system where these prosecutors has purposely withheld information that they knew was crucial to the defensive case, in order to get the case dismissed. So I mean, some people spent like 5 years in jail for having like a $20 bag of heroin on them. The punishment did not fit the crime at all, and it was basically all because of these records that weren't passed down. So on a blockchain, you would be able to see this. Whereas it took 5 years to prove it, and literally, I mean, people's lives were destroyed over it. I was just like, oh my god, and because nobody's keeping tabs on these people who are meant to be doing these drug tests. If they were, they'd be able to see it. But the fact is, nobody was doing anything, because everybody was, trusting that somebody else would do it when they weren't. So I think that what the project that you're starting there could have huge ramifications, for corporates and the way things are run in the future.
Let's see how we go, right? We're going to be testing out sort of in like a small niche area, but of course the plan is to expand out. So classic, just MVP style, make sure it's solid and build out on top of that. But we're probably going to have to move fast, because we do want to be able to present something solid by the time CoinGeek New York happens in October, or CoinGeek Online at that point. So that gives us a time frame, right? It's April now, going to October. It's like 5 months or so now.
Cool. I can't imagine. I really hope that this thing is done by then. Oh my goodness.
Yeah, man. I don't know. Like, usually I'm an optimistic guy, but I'm also like pragmatic, and so I think this might definitely go longer. I just got word now. I just got a message saying that Singapore is going into proper lockdown on Tuesday.
Really?
So, yeah, that's interesting. But yes, on that note, brother, I am gonna have to head out.
Yeah, no, thanks for joining me. It's been an absolute pleasure speaking to you, Mr. Sexy Samuels. No doubt we will. No doubt we'll see each other again. Well, I might. Yes. You're going to be on the BSV channel later on.
Yes. So will be. What time will that be at? 4 hours from now.
It's 12 o'clock here in the UK. So when is it? Captain invited you on? Was it 6 p.m.?
4 p.m.
Oh, 4 p.m. Oh, 4 hours.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
Oh, well, tell you what, I will. I'll send him a message, see if I can jump on and join you. I'll see you then, maybe.
Cool. Sounds good, man.
Excellent. Cheers, mate. All right. See you later. Bye. Bye.